Welcome back. We're continuing to explore some of the tools that we can use to actually execute our Python code now that we have our local development environment set up on Mac and Linux. So I'm in the command line here, and let's go ahead and say that I want to use my command line or my terminal combined with VSCode, which I'm actually going to use to edit my Python file. Right. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and jump in here. Let's make a move to the desktop. The other day I was working in a sandbox here. Let's see if that guy is still here. Looks like it is. And let's list out what's there. Let's go into that code. Let's list out what's there. And I can see I've got in my current working directory, right? If I print my working directory, you can see that I'm in sandbox and code directory that's sitting on my desktop. I can see that I have this test.py file, right? Let's go ahead and say that I want to make a modification to that file using VSCode. Like I'm going to start working on a challenge in Learn, and I want to be working on my code in VSCode and testing it by executing it in the terminal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the keyword code or the command code, and I'm just going to finish by giving it the file that I want to open. And just as always, we can use this command with any sort of directory or file path, right? If I give it I guess I'll go ahead and show you a directory after we do this one, right? But I can give it an absolute path. I can use a home directory path. I can use a relative path, which I'm using here. All three of those will work just the same. But I go ahead and execute this, and it actually brings up my VS Code. Looks like I had one running already. I'm going to go ahead and just rearrange my windows, so hopefully we can all continue to see in a way that's a little bit more effective for everybody, right? So I can now see that I am in this file. I'm in test.py. Let's go ahead and close out some of these extra files that I had open, right? I can see here I have test.py open, and the fact that there's a little white dot here in VS Code is just saying like, hey, just a heads up, you have some changes that have not been saved. The change that I have so far is I put an extra line. In general, you always want to end your files, your code files, with an empty line. So I always just make a habit of putting that in there right away. But if I got rid of that, looks like it still says it's unsaved, but that's okay. Let's just go ahead and do, our old classic. We're going to do a hello world here. And I went ahead and just hit the hotkey to save that. Of course, you can use the menu, but I would suggest you start learning hotkeys as much as possible, because that's how you're really going to start to gain speed as you navigate through your computer. In general, the mouse just tends to be slower than using the keyboard. So now that I have this, I want to switch back over to my terminal. Once I've done that, right now I can actually execute this file by using the command Python. And you might be saying, hey, that command Python is what I use to open up my Python shell. And that's absolutely true, right? Same command, but if you give it a file, instead of opening that Python shell, it'll just execute the file that you tell it to. In this case, it executes the file hello world that I just did. And let's just go ahead. I'm going to get rid of one of these parentheses. Again, if I switch over here, I run that command again, it's going to give me my errors just the same way as it would inside a REPL or a Jupyter Notebook or any other code interpreter, or even the built-in code interpreters in the challenges and Learn, any of those other things that you've been using. There are some built-in tools to run code in here, right, where I can just hit this play button and it actually brings up a terminal down here. There's this built-in terminal. Looks like maybe I'd want to go make sure that I'm in the right place. Let's go desktop, sandbox, code, right? Here I could use this terminal in here as well. In general, I'm not a huge fan of using the built-in terminal in VS Code, but I know that some people are. You just have to be a little bit careful when you're doing that. You make sure you know which environment you're running out of, right? For me, I can tell pretty clearly because of my Anaconda setup, that this is my base environment. It's the same environment I'm using over here. I can also tell that it's using my Z shell prompt. That is my regular shell that I've customized. So we have this built-in one. We can use that as well. But in general, I really prefer to have these sort of two things. And, just as always, we can, I'll do the same function that we did in the two shell interpreters. What did we do? We did return num square root and num squared. And then here, right, I am going to need a print statement, and we'll do that with the number 9 as we did before. Go ahead and give that a save, switch over to the terminal, go ahead and run that, and I can see that I do get my same exact tuple out in the terminal. So in general, when you're in the DSI, this is the way that you're going to be running most of your code. So I would encourage you to start to get ready to do that as soon as possible. You really want to start using the tools that you're going to be using in the long term as soon as possible. So that's how we can use VS Code in combination with the terminal, right? I was going to show you one other thing. If I wanted to, let's say I have this open and I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to go ahead and go back into my sandbox. I'm going to say, hey, I don't want to open just any single file out of my sandbox. My sandbox is like representative of a whole project, right? I want to open that entire project. I can give it a relative directory path. In this case, just the single dot that's saying I want to open up my current working directory, and it will go ahead and start up a VS Code instance. Again, I'll make a little space, arrange my things. But now I can see in this file navigator that is a part of VS Code built in, I have my sandbox, right? I have my code, I have my nested code file, I have my test.py, which I was just working in, right? I have my test2.py, and I can come in here and print this is a test. Go ahead and give that a save. Jump over to my terminal, and I can again Python, and this is in code, nested code, and this is test2.py, right? I can go ahead and execute that, and I do get my output. So, in general, once you get introduced into object-oriented programming, a lot of the work that you're going to be doing is on code bases that have multiple Python files that you're doing imports to and from with different methods. This is the common sort of paradigm that you're going to be working in between VS Code and your terminal. So that's it for this video. We're going to see you in the next lesson. We're going to talk a little bit about Jupyter Notebooks and Google Colabs, and that's going to be it for this development setup section. If you're in pre-course, you're going to go ahead and move on to the GitHub section, and if you're in basic prep, you can go ahead and return to the intermediate Python or the introduction to statistics now that you've finished the basic prep. So that's it for this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next.